Welcome back, my fellow SharePoint developers. In this video, I wanted to cover something that I haven't really touched on throughout the process of developing this application in this series. One of those issues is that you have to always be aware that sometimes you do not see certain things on the screen as you're developing inside of your application. And what I want to aim for is for us to be able to see what's going on behind the scenes. And to do so, we need to ensure that we're routinely looking inside of the console. So if I right click here and I select inspect, I'm going to put this to console. I'm going to refresh this. And right away, you'll see that there are some issues that we haven't addressed here. So let's go ahead and fix those, shall we? The first issue you'll see here on the console is that it's saying that a list should have a unique key prop. And you'll often see this whenever you're doing any kind of map method to iterate through an array. And I'll show you where we did that. Again, we've been going through these videos. We haven't really been paying attention to some of these things, but these are important things. I know it's just a warning. It will not break the application from building, but it is important to acknowledge that those issues need to be addressed. So let's go to Visual Studio Code. Inside of our controller here, in our lure type, you'll notice that we're doing an iteration using the map method here, but you have to have a key for every individual iteration that you do for a rendering of a component. So the way to fix this is simply by adding a key here, and the key you can set it to option dot value, and that should fix this one. And I believe there was another one further down here. Here we go. This is another iteration for the yes or no object. So we're going to add a key here, and that is also going to be option dot value. Save that. Let's go back to the console. So in the console now, we've taken care of these warnings. The next thing it's saying is you have provided an out of range value undefined for the select. Essentially what this is saying is typically for MUI, you have to have a default value for anything like a radio group, a select field. And so the problem here is that, for instance, this one, the lure type, does not have a default value. Now, typically you will think, okay, well, I just very simply have to add a default value inside of my select field. And you can simply do that by typing in default value, setting it to empty. But I'm going to tell you that this is the problem. And the problem is going to be because you have to remember that when you create a control from the React hook controller, it now encapsulates the other control, and now it is basically controlled by the React hook form instead of the Material UI component. And so the problem that you have here is that, for instance, you're basically doing the same thing as adding name here again. And obviously you're going to have a problem because name is already existing in the controller. I wish it would kind of give you an error for the same thing to tell you that there should be a default value on the controller, but it doesn't do that. So this is just one important learning lesson to understand the way things work whenever you're basically passing on the responsibility of the control to the React hook form. So now, how do we fix that? How do we fix the problem that we're having right now with it not having a default value? And essentially in the console, it's basically telling us that you have an out of range value, which is, in this case, is clearly undefined. We didn't define it anywhere. So if you recall, what we did is inside of our validation folder, we created a validation file. And inside our validation file, we had values for title only. And so the two options that need to have a value is the radio button, which in our case was running low, and lure type. Now, conventionally, I think the best option would be always to add some kind of empty value for things like lure type and running low. But I would recommend just make it a habit, make it practice to always go ahead and put in a value for all of them. I know that initially I didn't do that. Again, it these are the kind of things that you learn, and you as you continue to grow as a developer, you'll know that these are the kind of things that you need to fix. So just best practice, I think the best thing you can do is just going forward, even though it's not necessarily required, it is a very good idea to go ahead and put in some empty values for some of the properties. And you'll notice that it's pretty rapid to do that because I have type safety, so everything is predictive text. IntelliSense is picking that all up. So now this should now fix the issue. Because if you remember the hook form, it uses this default values inside of the use form hook. So if we scroll up here to the use form, these are the default values. And so the controller is attached to the use form, and the use form is now controlling the field, in our case, the select field. And so that will eliminate the material UI issue. Putting default value with an empty string would have done the same thing, but then you would have gotten a different warning that would have said, wait a minute, you went from an uncontrolled component because it wasn't controlled by React hook form, and then you're switching it to a controlled one. And so because you're switching from the default value that was in the component to the default value that comes from the hook form, the moment that you select a different value. So ultimately, the best thing to do is always make sure that default values has your default values, even if they're not required. So now, if we go ahead and save our changes, run the building process on this, and we're going to open the distribution folder in File Explorer. Get ready to copy our files. You can go ahead and highlight them, and it looks like it built out successfully. So let's go back to our browser, go back to the style library and load these files. It's going to ask us to replace some of them, obviously, because we've obviously made some changes. So some of these files are going to be updated. It looks like everything went through. So now if I refresh it, my errors are gone, my warnings are gone. So this is a very important step to learn as you're going through the development process, is to always ensure that periodically, even if you come back to it later, it's important to periodically check on this console. So that's going to do it for this video. I'd like to thank you for coding with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful, give it a like. If you think someone else can benefit from it, please share it. If you have any questions, please post it in the comments and subscribe. It's free for you, and it really helps me out. Finally, if you can, go ahead and click on that bell icon to get notified when the next video is added.